All right, well, we're so fortunate to have with us today the CEO and co-founder of Trojan Energy, Ian McKenzie. Thank you so much for talking to us from, what, Scotland?
Yeah, from Scotland. So yeah, all the way from Scotland. It's not quite as cold as you guys get it, but we have a little snow today, but not quite what you guys get in Boston. So no, thank you very much for having me on. I'm looking forward to having this conversation with you guys.
So the name of your company is Trojan Energy. And if you guys watching are like, why would you name your company Trojan? Didn't they sneak things into a city? Wasn't that Ulysses? Well, it sounds like you're trying to sneak something in somewhere. Can you tell us more about that?
Weren't those the Greeks? The Greeks did that.
Oh, yeah, the Greeks did the Trojans.
That's exactly the point. Yeah, absolutely. When we were working out, you know, we've designed this technology, which we'll come on to discuss, about hiding EV charging infrastructure under the pavement. And when we were working out the name of that, we were thinking, yeah, where do you hide stuff? Or what names do we have of companies? You know, what can we call our company of hiding stuff? And we came up with the name Trojan Energy. So essentially what we've designed is a charging point that's flat and flush with the pavement, so that you can walk over these things, you can drive over them, you can drive in a 20-ton truck over the top of these things and no problem. And then when you want to charge, you have a lance, and we have one here, which we can play with in a bit, that you then, you take out the boot of your car and you insert it into the socket, and then you can plug into your car and get charged. So it's designed to become a very simple way that all the people that park on street, that park, I guess, on the road, they don't have a driveway, they don't have a garage, how are they going to get charged? And it's the solution for that, is what we've been designing.
Okay, but you just said electrical outlet on the ground in the street,
getting wet.
People are going to get electrocuted. What were you thinking?
Yeah.
Oh no,
we're based in Scotland, and actually in Aberdeen in Scotland. And Aberdeen probably is the largest number of subsea engineers in the world. I was a subsea engineer in the oil industry before we started Trojan, and we've used a lot of techniques and some of the technologies that came inspired by the oil industry for making connections underwater, essentially electrical connections underwater. And we're using a lot of those techniques to allow us to bring a whole new type of connection to the EV charging industry. So it's those ways of being able to manage water and electricity together that's allowed us to actually invent this technology and bring it to market. One of the things that we know about water is water always finds a way in. So the system's designed to keep water out, but it also manages water through the system so that it never ever comes in contact with the electrical side, and then actually we manage it out, and we actually have a way that we can expel the water out of the system. So it makes it very robust in that sense, and we can actually, you know, all sorts of muck and all things that you would see on the road, we can kind of manage that process without it ever coming into contact with the electrical connectors. And that's what makes this type of connection possible.
I was going to ask you about the muck part, because here where we live in New England, there's lots of slush and muck and mud and stuff. So if I go out to my car in the morning and it's been, you know, there's slush on the ground or whatever, do I have to spend a lot of time like cleaning that off before I can put the lance in, or how does that work?
No, all you have to, honestly, just kick it off with your foot will be good enough. So it's, like I say, it's designed with kind of oil industry robustness in mind. So it is designed so that, yeah, as long as you can clear it off, you know, with your foot, then that's enough. It doesn't need to be spot clean to be able to actually insert the lance. And you know, we've done all sorts of tests where, you know, we've done the peanut butter test where we put peanut butter in and out, and it still works fine. It makes a bit of a mess. You need to hose it down, but yeah, the connections all still work great. So that's what been one of the kind of key challenges, is how do we make a vertical connection that actually allows the lance to be inserted in. And it's that vertical connection that gives some of the other huge advantages of the technology. The bits that are under the pavement are very narrow, about 7 inches across. And there is a lot of stuff going on under our pavements. There's, you know, fiber, electric, gas, water. And so you actually need to be very narrow to fit in amongst all those. And we'll come to where we deployed it in London at the moment. There's a lot going on in London streets. But being really small and compact is what allows it to go in. And that vertical connection allows us to be really small and compact. And very few moving parts, which means that it's far more robust and far more reliable going forward.
But now, I mean, I've seen a lot of EV chargers because I drive an EV. And here in America, it is almost always, without fail, either something mounted to the side of a building or a big post or some box sticking out of the ground with a big cable coming off of it. And it's either nice and short because it knows it's going to a Tesla because it's a Tesla supercharger, or it's got this big coil of cable and they have a string that's going to pull it up. It's broken half the time. But that's just kind of how we deal with it. It seems like, well, that's one solution. Why make it all complicated and have to do peanut butter tests?
Yeah, the key point is where we're putting this technology is really urban areas where there's generally reasonably high footfall. So in the UK, about 30 to 40% of people park their cars on the street. So that's about 10 million cars in the UK, and similar statistics across Europe. So it's probably about 100 million cars in Europe. And around the world, probably about 300 to 400 million cars are parked on streets. And in cities, especially older cities, Boston, I guess, is a great example of that. And Europe, there's a lot of older cities. It's way above 50% of people are parking their cars in the street. And there's a lot of people walking up and down those streets. And all the municipalities and councils, they really, really don't want to clutter the streets with lots of charging furniture and lots of posts. They want the streets to be as clean as possible for people who are walking on those pavements and other street users. It's a balance to get right between what EV drivers need and what pedestrians on the sidewalk need. And what we see certainly in big cities like London, where we're deploying most of our charging points at the moment, is that councils really don't want any more posts. I mean, literally no more posts on the pavements. The pavements are for people who walk on them, not for posts. And so that's why we then have to think, okay, how else could we do it? Well, we could have rapid chargers in car parks, but absolutely what we hear from our customers is, if I can get a charge point outside my house, that's where I'm going to charge because it's so much more convenient and lower cost too.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point. I mean, as EV drivers know, about 90% of the time you're charging at home. But like my parents have this problem in the city. They don't have a garage or a driveway, and so they're stuck in the same situation. So if I was to tell them to get this solution, and by the way, I just want to point out to our viewers, there's two solutions here, right? There's one made for kind of homeowners, and then there's one that's more commercial. But let's talk about the homeowners for a second. If I wanted to install one at my house, what am I looking in terms of expense to get this installed?
Yeah, so at the moment, we're starting to install them for individual fleet drivers. We're only selling them to fleets at the moment, but it will expand to consumers in the UK and then further afield over the next 18 months. At the moment, a fleet driver would be charged a minimum fee of £99 a month, essentially. So they would be paying £99, I guess 1.2 exchange rate, so about $120 a month to actually have one of these. And actually, when you then start being able to charge on your own home domestic tariff, which is a lot cheaper, certainly here in Europe, than going to a rapid charger, it actually is a lot cheaper overall for these high mileage drivers, fleet drivers, taxi drivers, than going to public charging. Then in time, as we come down our technology cost curve, we'll be able to offer that at a much lower price point, probably about half of that, and in which case it will become very, very competitive versus going to a rapid charger. And that's what we want it to be. We want it to ultimately be much cheaper than going to a rapid charger, but much more convenient too. So it just becomes a no-brainer, really, to have one of these outside your front door.
So it sounds like you're doing a CaaS, or charging as a service, which seems really smart. Okay, so does the fleet operator have to sign up for a certain minimum length of time before you'll agree to that?
Yeah, at the moment the contract is a three-year contract, and there's a number of kind of advantages that a fleet driver, because they're such high mileage drivers, we're able to offer at the moment better prices for those. But we're in the process of deploying 500 of these chargers. Over the next couple of years, will be 2,000 or 3,000, and then going into the tens of thousands. And as we do that, we come right down our cost curve, allowing us to deploy it. And so the fleet drivers is a great place for us to start, but ultimately we want this technology to be for everyone. And like I say, we want it to be cheaper than public charging, so it just becomes a no-brainer, and then super convenient because it's right outside your house. So yeah, it's charging as a service. is how we're doing it at the moment. We will, over the next 18 months, be starting to look for partners in the US to actually start saying, okay, who would work with us on this? We're not just going to jump into the US ourselves without having the right people to work with, but that's something that we'll be doing to make sure that we get the right partners on board so that we can offer the service in the US as well.
So 2 questions about charging at home with this. So there's the Lance that you have like in your boot, your trunk. And then there's how much charging speed do you get out of that?
So here in the UK, we have the 240 volt system. So essentially, we can a single phase will charge at 7 kilowatts. The system is all capable of doing 22 kilowatts across 3 phases, and we do a lot of charging like that on the streets with the council model that you talked about. But the home charging model at the moment, if you have a 3-phase connection and a 240 volt supply, we can go to 22 kilowatts, and half of that if you have a 110 supply. Across 3 phases, it depends on what your house and the electricity supply into your house. So yeah, it's designed, that it becomes a super convenient and faster way for people to get charged when they're parked on the street. In Europe, and we've designed for Europe, and that largely complies with all the standards, and 90 different standards we have to comply with to be able to sell this product in Europe and UK. And there's a few more that we'd have to hit for the US as well. But yeah, actually complying with all these standards to get a product like this onto the street, it's quite an investment. But hopefully we should get to a place where it becomes something that actually people who are parked on the street in roughly the same spot outside the house can then always get charged in a really convenient way. And it, as we said before, hopefully cheaper than public charging. The other thing that we should also mention that within the next couple of years, we'll be also starting to trial vehicle to home technology. So taking the load, you guys know all about that, but load from the vehicle back to supply the house and sort of arbitrage at peak time versus off-peak time. And then people at home with solar panels on their house can also charge that even though their car is on the street. So adding all that into the mix, will add hopefully a whole pile of extra value to the customer.
That's cool.
Yeah. So what's physically involved in installing one of these? Because, when you talk about London, all I hear about, like I'm into archaeology, so I always get these stories and it's like, this homeowner tried to install, like a patio and they found a Viking hoard of coins. And so they had to stop and they couldn't do anything. So like, how much are we digging under the street? And then, do we have to take up, are we excavating large sections of earth and moving all the bricks out of the way and all my neighbors are going to hate me for 6 months or something?
No, I mean, so when we like I say, there's 2 ways that we do it. We deploy up to either 15 charge points for a council, and that we can dig up to about 100 meters of street for that, and that's all done within about a week and all put back to normal, and then the charge points are left in place. For the single charger, the Aeon charger as we call it, that's done in a day. So it'll be all installed and done in a day. When you talk about archaeology, it's interesting. Digging up the streets of London, you do find some interesting. We found at one point what looked like a gas line, and nobody, the gas contractor, had no idea. They said it's not our gas line. No one seemed to have it. But what it turned out, it was the old gas lighting for the streetlights in London, and it hadn't been used in 100 years. But so we ended up being able to take that away to get our chargers in. So there is a bit of that in these old cities. But again, it comes back to that part about being really super compact, especially narrow. It allows you just to slot in, push a fiber cable this way, another fiber cable that way, and slot it in between. We have what we call a base unit. So it's our cables come into a metal base unit, and then the cables from that come into the charger, which drops into that base unit, which is a metal cylinder, and then it's kind of flat and flush with the surface from there. But the great thing about that is what it means is that the charger can get changed out in literally 5 minutes. And that's where all the moving parts are, the seals and anything that needs maintained, the electronics. that could all get changed out within about 5 minutes. So if there was ever a problem, we never really service them on the street. We just take it out, put a new one in, and take it back to the warehouse to get fixed.
That's really smart. All right, so how about the homeowner asked this question, which is, I get one of these installed in front of my house, but then anyone with a lance can come along and steal my power.
Yeah, so it's an interesting question. I'll ask you a question in a second about this. So, first of all, the lance identifies you, and so we'll only let who we want to let charge in various places. But there is a question, and we're going to be testing this over the next few months, and it's a good question on human nature. Will people want to share with their neighbors? So our back office will allow us to, if you want to share this charge point with your neighbor can use it, and then we can understand how much electricity was used, and we can then refund the householder for the electricity used, and that'll all be sorted out with the back office. The real question is, will people share or not?
I love that idea, actually.
Well. I mean, since it will be my charger, can I set, certain limitations on it? Once you get past, 70% stated charge, I want to charge you more money. Or once you charge for longer than 2 hours, I want to start charging a $5 an hour fee.
Or only between certain hours while I'm at work.
I pull into charge points all over the place, and they all have completely different, either the electricity is way overpriced, or it's free, and then if you park for longer than 2 hours, it's $5 every hour after that, or it's a $10 fee one time. It's like, I can never keep track of it. Or there's an idling fee, so if you've charged all the way up to your charge limit, then it starts to charge you. Will you give that much flexibility to a user?
There will be quite a lot of flexibility. I think that the key points on the flexibility will be, if you let your neighbors charge, you will get a cheaper price for your electricity. So ultimately, higher utilization is better for everyone. So finding ways to do that. Put simply, the system is designed to be allowed to be shared with neighbors, or to lock it down so it's just you. We're starting to deploy these now, and we're going to start getting good data over the next year or two. But it's a bit of a social experiment, because it hasn't really been done before, this type of connection and the ability to share with neighbors with local electricity grid points. So I think we're going to get some quite interesting data over the next sort of 3-6 months, and really begin to understand how that market can evolve and how the sharing market will evolve, and that ultimately can lower the cost for everyone, because it makes a big difference if you're sharing it with your neighbor. It allows you, to half that price of that minimum fee if you're doing both the same amount of charging, and then it becomes super compelling right from the start. And there's easily enough capacity.
Let's help Ian get some data, folks. Comment down below. Tell us where you're from and whether you would share with your neighbor or not. And if so, what would the rules you'd put in be?
Yeah, I can't wait to see those comments, because it's exactly the type of thing, the sort of questions we're asking. And so if the listeners are happy to put those comments in, I will read those. Absolutely.
That's great. So we've talked a lot about the charger and how it's going underground, and how it's not even as big a project as I think some regular old EV chargers are.
True.
But now I want to talk more about the lance, because I'm going to need to carry around this. It's not just a cable. It's this looks like a metal cylinder. Can you kind of
looks like a bike pump?
Yeah.
Essentially, what we have here is the lance. Now the cable itself, that's a 3-phase cable, weighs 3 kilograms. The lance itself weighs 2 kilograms, and what you have is. This is the bit that goes, into the pavement. It goes in this much into the pavement. This sinks into the charge point this much, and then we've got a ground seal here. And once it goes in, it locks in place. So a locking mechanism catches on these lugs, and it kind of locks in place. And then once it's locked in place, you then pull up this handle, and that says, okay, you're ready, and you start charging. And when you're finished, you drop it, and it unlocks, and you can take it out. So it becomes quite a simple system to use, but there will be another version of this that's even slicker. And so that's coming next year. That's got a kind of grip handle, can be single use. It allows you to plug your own cable into it, and we'll have a release button. So that's coming. This was the kind of first product to kind of get it out there, but there's definitely new versions coming down the line. But actually the feedback we get from users is really positive, because it's something that is small enough that it kind of sits in the corner of your boot. but actually, really robust on the street, and it feels robust. We've hit these things with baseball bats and everything else, and but the other point about them is that they're designed with the pavement user in mind. So soft edges, rounded edges, this handle on top bends, and that's all about people walking down the street and accidentally bumping into them. And we've done a lot of work with disabilities groups to make sure that partially sighted people and people using the pavement aren't going to hurt themselves on these chargers if they happen to bump into them. The lance is that kind of piece of the puzzle that allows us to make a connection that hasn't ever been done before, but it does mean that you have something that you have to carry around with you. But it's also because it becomes plug and play. It's like when I charge on my driveway, I just use a single cable, and that's the only place I ever charge. And what we hear now from residents who have these charge points on the streets in London is that's the only thing they carry with them, because that's the only place they charge. So it just becomes the thing you carry about with you. And if you go on a long journey, then you use a rapid charger, essentially, which comes with its own cable, obviously.
Now, why do you need the plunger part of the lance?
Yeah, so it's a great questions. The plunger part is to take us up to a height of 800 mil. And in the UK, there was guidance that if you're going to have something on the pavement, it needs to be 800 mil high.
Oh, so people will see it. I see.
Yeah, so that's the only reason. But actually, that's changing, and so we'll be able to do away with the plunger part, which will simplify the whole thing in the future. Yeah.
So let's go to the more commercial model, and this is, I assume, going to be put in, you said, like multiple units at a time on streets like in London. Can you tell us, with that system, do I still need to carry some kind of plunger with me? How does that work?
Yeah, so at the moment, we have 135 charge points in some of the busiest parts in London, and we're putting another 500 in to another borough at the moment, and we will be rolling thousands out next year. So at the moment, those users, yes, they will carry the lance, but however, from around May, June next year, there'll also be the option to use a tap-and-go payment system to take a lance from the cabinet and be able to use that on the charge points. It's a good sort of philosophical question that we are often asked about. Okay, how do I use your charge points if I'm visiting and I don't have a lance? The tap and go system will allow them to take a lance out and off the cabinet. However, it's worth bearing in mind that generally speaking, we are designing this product for the residents that live on that street. So it's the people that live there to be able to do all the regular charging. We're happy for some visitors to come, but in a lot of areas where we're installing, especially in London, it's residents parking only. So only residents can park there anyway. And it's really those people. We're trying to be the driveway charger provider for the people that park on streets, for those residents, really.
Now, if I was a municipality and I wanted to install a lot of charging and I wanted it to be, more available to more people, but I did want to be able to kind of clear the street out for some kind of a parade or a, market or something like that, would it be possible to have a semi-permanent version of your system, or maybe even just, multiples of your systems that are locked in place and only the city could unlock them and take them out? So that way, if I wanted to have, 6th Avenue just covered all the way down with these chargers, so that way any EV could pull into any of the spots and plug in, either with the tap and go system or something like that. But then, we're having the parade or we're having a big market, the city could come, take them all out, and then there are no chargers there. And
why would they need to take them out?
If you wanted to have all of that space back, and there weren't going to be any cars, and it was just going to be a big fair in the middle of the street or something.
But I mean, his system works perfectly for that because it's all flush mounted.
Well, right. But I'm saying if you wanted to have them semi-permanently installed, is that the kind of thing that you would offer?
Let me comment on it. So some of the things that we could do is, and we can certainly, our CTOs wanting to build this product is a product that will essentially have a lance that will have a normal household socket on it, so that for fairs and these type of things, they can actually be on the street, and when no one's charging, we can then actually have pillars in there that allow people to plug
for like
in.
farmers markets and
That's
stuff.
even
Exactly.
better.
So you don't need to have generators or any of that sort of stuff.
That's
so
nice.
I like that.
yeah. So we'll see that product come, and then actually giving the municipalities control is quite a useful thing. So we can absolutely, if a municipality says, look, we're digging the street this week, and we're going to do paint new yellow lines, and so we need no one to be charging. If someone has left their car locked in, we can easily send a signal to actually unlock that lance and get it taken out so that they can do whatever they need to do. So that way we can clear the streets. There's even 1 or 2 places in London where we're installing quite close to schools. And they've said, we'd really rather that all lances were out before 8 o'clock in the morning so that kids on their way to school, there's nothing in the way because the streets are so busy. And we can tell residents that if they're not out, we will be picking up their lance and taking it out and that way we kind of get them to learn the right behaviors, the users to learn the right behaviors, that there's charging is appropriate sometimes and then not at others in some really busy areas. So, yeah.
So, Ian, I have a question. There are some new smart chargers coming on the market, like the Tesla Wall Charger Gen 3, and I think one from Smart Charge America, where you can have lots of them, like 80 in a parking lot. And normally you couldn't do that because there's not enough power being supplied by the grid for all that, but they're so smart that they can balance that. Is it possible with your system to do something similar where if I was a municipality, I could install like 100 of them down the street and I don't have enough power to power all 100 simultaneously, but can they share?
Yeah, this is one of the cool things about our technology. We call it cloud arbitrated charging. So we take a 68 kilowatt supply from the grid because that keeps us under the 100 amp 3-phase connection, and then we split that across 15 charging points. And we do it. We don't do it in a kind of dumb way of, well, okay, it's how many ever cars plug in, and you get half, and then you get 2 more plug in, it's a quarter. We actually use our own algorithms on the cloud, and we talk to each individual car, understand from people's user preferences about when they want to charge, understand where cars are on their charging cycle, are they tailing off, and essentially manage that 68 kilowatt connection in a very sort of controlled way and clever way to make sure that we use it as best we can. There might be a taxi driver who wants charged out really quickly on 22 kilowatts, and someone else, as long as I'm charged by 10 in the morning, I'm happy. And so by balancing it across people's needs, we can then provide one guy 22 kilowatts and one guy maybe as small as 1.5. So it really depends on, and we've seen that in action, used that in action, and it works really well. But we actually go a stage further than that, and we did a project with the British government here to actually use grid signals. So the grid operator can send us signals to say when there's stress, there's not enough supply in that area, and that will automatically send a signal to our system, which will then take charging down, so that it will kind of choke back charging, but then the users all get a chance to override that. On their app will say, hey, you've been throttled, but you get a chance to override it if you want, and if you don't need to, you don't need to. And that way we can help manage peak time on the grid when there's a lot of stress, a lot of power requirements. We can help manage that and build flexibility. In the UK, we call it building the grid we want. So I think that's what we want, build as much flexibility into the system as possible.
I love talking to companies like yours. That's why we're on Disruptive Investing, companies that are disrupting how things work, because the typical companies looking at this are talking about putting, a box on a wall somewhere, and you figured out a way to do this that's so unobtrusive. When you don't need it, you don't even know it's there. So it seems to me that the total addressable market for what you're doing is humongous if you believe that EVs are coming like we do. So talk to me about your business in the next few years. And also talk to investors who are watching right now who might be kind of like, I'd like to invest in this.
So good timing. I mean, so essentially where we're at is let's take the market for a start. Like we said, there's 400 million cars around the world that park on street. Just taking Europe alone, it's 100 million cars, and that contingent spend over 100 billion pounds a year on petrol and diesel. So somehow that 100 billion of petrol and diesel that's been spent on street, for cars that park on street, has to move to being supplied by some sort of electric vehicle charging solution. So yeah, it's an enormous market. For us, the challenge is scaling fast enough, and we've been building our team. We've tripled in size in the last 12 months, and we'll do that again in the next 12 months. So building, building a company and building the supply chains into that. Building stuff is hard. Building software, but building stuff is hard. And so that's our challenge. But we're getting after that. We reckon that within the next 2 or 3 years, we'll be doing about 25,000 charge points a year. But ultimately, we need to get to hundreds of thousands of charge points a year to be able to actually even address a small chunk of this market. So it's an enormous challenge, but we're determined to get after it. At the moment, we raised money from a Scottish National Investment Bank in the summer. But we'll be doing another raise over the next, we're starting the process over the next few months, ultimately aiming to close by next summer, where we'll raise around about 25 million of equity and about 60, 80 million of debt, roughly. So that's just the first of probably many, because it's an enormous challenge to scale into this market quick enough to meet what we're seeing from customers and people who actually want this product. So.
Now, Ian, you mentioned that your background was in, oil and gas and solving problems underwater. Talk to me about your team and your background in not only engineering but business, because it is hard to scale a business like this. And as Elon has pointed out, like a lot of people think, well, I figure out how to do the prototype. That was the hard part. Now it's all downhill. But it sounds like that it is really hard to scale.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know if you guys use Skyscanner so it's to check out. Various airline tickets and where to get the cheapest. It's a British company, but they recently sold for I think it was 1.6 billion. But when I was spoken to their team, and they were like, "Yeah, software, get product out," and I had to say, "Look, we had to spend I guess $4 million or $5 million before we could get one charger onto the street because we had to do all the design and yeah." So yeah, that challenge of being able to kind of scale. And put really good hardware in that's safe, and really robust is super important to us. Coming from I came from the oil industry. I was, like I say, a subsea engineer, and then I ended up managing large teams and large projects inside the oil industry of hundreds of people and hundreds of millions of pounds, and then ultimately got into the investment side in oil companies and helping bring new oil fields to sanction. So I've got a lot of red in my ledger that I need to go and sort out, but that investment piece was really useful to understand, because ultimately a lot of this comes down to economics. You've got to have a great product, but it's got to be it's got to make sense for people. It's got to be cheaper than what they do right now. And it will be. Then the rest of the team, we have my twin brother, my identical twin brother. He started a couple of companies in the oil industry before, and he built a number of products. And one of the people he worked with was one of the other co-founders. He's a fantastic mechanical engineer, design engineer. And then finally, we've got our CTO, Sandy, who I worked with for 10 years, again in the oil industry. He used to build the control systems for our Trident nuclear submarines engines. So he's unbelievable at software, electronics. So that was our kind of core team, and since then we built up and we've got a lot of great people. One of the key advantages of being in Aberdeen is that we're able to steal some of the great people from the oil industry. So there's a lot of talent that are wanting to transition in the energy transition, and being able to actually steal them and use them for all the good things that we can do in the energy transition, is one of the exciting things about being based where we are.
Now, I want to give you a little bit of pushback because, I think that there are a lot of environmentalists who go, we need to get to this transition as fast as possible, and anything that gets in the way, and I'm not saying that your system gets in the way, it is a solution, but charging is such a difficult problem, and especially on-street charging. A lot of, not a lot, but it's starting to become a thing that there's going to be this right to charge laws that are going to be passed. And it's going to say, I have the right to plug in my car however I want, and nobody can stop me as long as I'm being reasonable. And reasonable can be, in some of those cases, running an extension cord across the street where you might tape it down, or dangling it above, you know, running a piece of angle iron way out over the street and dangling it down. And while it isn't pretty, isn't this going to be just so much faster? And isn't this, we need to do this, it has to get done. And also it's going to be so much cheaper. What do you say to that? Do you think that that is going to come into play? Or do you think that a system like yours is going to be more easily adopted and swallowed by municipalities and governments?
A lot of municipalities and governments are trying to make more active travel happen. So people walking, cycling, moving into public transport, that type of thing. And so they want to see the pavements used more with people walking. That's, you know, certainly, you know, we see a big push to that in the cities here in the UK and Europe. So so then the idea of running cables across these, well, I mean, it's a non-starter. We do see it in some places, but councils are beginning to hand out fines, and we're beginning to see incidents of people tripping over and you know, things happening. So trying to find a way, and that's just at a very small scale. So when we get everyone transferring over, and if we're all trying to do that, it will be a free-for-all out there. So trying to avoid that, and it won't just be our solution. There will be other solutions out there, you know, and it will take a mix of solutions. But actually ensuring that it's done properly, and there's no people who are actually doing things that really shouldn't be done, is going to be an important part of that. And I think what we'll see is there'll be some places where maybe if you're right at the end of a street and you need to run a cable out to your car, maybe that's appropriate, maybe that works. But if you're on a busy street, you know, between two train stations, you know, then it really isn't appropriate. So I think we'll see it as a mix of solutions for various places. And for us, that's what, you know, we want to make sure that we're ready to provide our segment of the market where our technology is appropriate. You know, we're ready to deploy and go. Yeah.
People who are watching now, who might be fleet operators, municipalities, or even just homeowners who want to learn more, first of all, where are you going to be going next? Because you're in, you know, UK and Scotland now, but where's next, and how should they get in touch with you?
At the moment, we're deploying in the UK, and we're largely in London. We're beginning to move further. Over the next year, we'll move into some of the other bigger cities in the UK. By 2024, after we do our big raise that we're planning for next summer, by 2024, we'll begin to move elsewhere. The US is obviously a target market for us. It's some of the big cities, Boston, New York, they've got thousands of on streets. So it really would be, you know, a fantastic market for us to go to. So, and then Europe, Southern Europe, Portugal, Spain, Italy has the highest incidence of on-street parking anywhere in the world. It's like driveways weren't invented in these countries. So there's, you know, these are huge attractive markets for us. How people can get in touch with us, the easiest way is via website. We've got a way that you can put your details in, and we have a team that will get back to people. Probably in terms of timing, like I say, moving outside the UK is likely to start happening in 2024, but it will happen fast. You know, by 25, we want to be really going into, you know, several cities and expanding beyond, you know, in these new territories that we go into.
Ian, thank you so much for joining us today. It was a pleasure talking to you, and I'm really excited about your technology.
Oh, thank you. No, we're excited too. And, you know, we're all part together of this whole energy transition. It's exciting. And thank you. I've been watching your videos, thoroughly enjoyable. So you guys are part of that too. So I appreciate all you're doing in that.
Thank you so much.